Okay, hello and welcome to this video. This is the third video in the Go To Special series. In the first two videos, I've tried to show us some uses of, some of the options we have in Go To Special Dialog. So far we've treated everything on the left and pretty much most things on the right, except for, okay, last cell, visible cells only, conditional format and data validation, which I would love to just handle in this video. Last cell, as you can see here, is really just pressing Control End. That's really what it is. So let me just use this data set here. If I were here and I press Control End, it takes me, of course, more or less like, to the bottom right, like last row or column of data. Okay, so let's go back to where we were. And then, using Control G special, you just do last cell and you do okay. Takes you down there. So there's not much I want to say about that. Let's try it with being somewhere here and see what happens. Control G, being away from the data. Last cell. Okay, so it still brings you back there because that's the last or furthermost, data point starting from the left. Okay, so that's all I'll say about that. So next one I want to talk about is visible cells. This comes in handy when you filter data. Now, this is one of the beautiful features of Excel. You can filter Control Shift L works, Alt AT works, whichever way. Go to the data tab and do filter. Sorry about that. Okay, so Control Shift L. Now I could filter maybe by gender, and I select just females. Okay, so now the data set obviously has been narrowed down. Most times when I want to perform any operation when there's an active filter, I'm always really scared that I hope I don't mess things up. So most times before I do anything, I always make sure that, oh, my selection is just for the filtered cells, which is the visible cells. So, for example, if I wanted to change all the Fs now to females because I filtered by F, and now I want to convert all of them to female, I can select the whole data and just press female and control enter. But somewhere in my mind, I'm always feeling like, what if this also populates in the cells that are not visible, the filtered out cells? So what I would rather do is I will select the data, I will do Control G, my special, all right? And then I'll do what? Visible cells only to give myself that comfort that it's only visible cells. I do okay. Right now, I know that it's just, the visible cells. I then select, I type female and I press Control Enter. Okay. And I'm sure that this only populated for the visible cells. So whenever you're in a situation where there's a filter, it's really important to always, make sure that you are selecting only visible cells. If I want to copy this data to another sheet. If I do Control A and I press Control C, it's going to copy what I want, but I'm never really comfortable that it's doing the right thing. So at this point, I will select again and say only visible cells so that I know I'm copying only visible cells. The shortcut to do that is Alt and semicolon. So once you do Alt and semicolon, you would see the changes to show you that it's selecting and deselecting some things. You can then press Control C, okay, and then you can take this to whatever location you want. So it's just important to always know what you are doing so that you don't one inadvertently change data that you don't want to change, and you don't also move data that you don't want to move. Okay, so like we've always said, or I've always said, the go to special is really your way of streamlining. I want to select these cells, but I want to do a special selection based on some predefined criteria: cells that are visible, cells that contain formulas, cells that contain notes, or cells that are constants, and so on. So let's go to the next one so we don't take too much time. Data validation. We know what data validation is. Most people always think that data validation means there's a drop down in the cell. That's not what it means. It just means that somebody has put in some conditions there, that must be fulfilled before the data is considered valid, right? And if those criteria or conditions are not met, then the data is not accepted. So, for example, if I want to do age, your age must be at least 0, greater than or equals to 0. So I can put a condition there to say if the number the person puts in there is minus anything, do not accept it. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the data validation means that there must be a drop down, which is just the least option list, when you select data validation, and there are a couple of other options. But what I want to do in this video is just talk about it from a go-to special standpoint. Now I'm looking at this data set. I don't know which cells have data validation in them or not. So how do I know? I'm going to use my go-to special and say, just streamline, show me just cells that contain what, data validation in them. Now you can see already that I have what, a drop down list here. So I know for sure these features. When I look at the other columns, I don't see anything. I really can't tell. So first I will select the data, Control A. I'll do my special. In this case, I'll just do maybe the Control G and Alt S. Okay, and I will say, okay, I skipped conditional formatting, should have come first, but that's fine. I'll do data validation and I say all. When I do all, it's saying that that's all data validation, not restricted to a particular type. I do okay. Now, do you see what's happened? So, despite the fact that the age doesn't have a drop down, there's a data validation on it. Because really, yes, I put a data validation to say that if the age is not greater than 0 and less than 100, you should not accept it. So now I can see the cells that contain data validation. I can go into data validation if I want to change them, or update them. But from that data set, I couldn't have known what was going on. But with the go to special, I'm able to streamline. When you also select just a single cell and you do Control G special and you say data validation now, and you say same, what it's going to do with same is going to show you only cells that contain the same data validation as the cell that you selected. Okay, so you do what? Okay, and you see it then selects notifications. Sometimes you just can't get rid of them. Okay, so right now it's selected, just the cells that contain the same data validation as the cell that I've selected. Okay, so that's really how that works. Whatever you do with that further on is dependent on your objective, but at least that way you are able to narrow down. Now let's look at conditional formatting. So this one is also similar to the other. You want to see cells or columns that have conditional formatting on them. For this that has, some yellow filled cells, it looks like it's obvious that, yeah, this may be some conditional formatting, because when I select the cell, normally if you would actually know if, the field is, this or that. But when I select the cell, it doesn't look like, okay, maybe there's a conditional formatting. I can go ahead and check, and say, okay, let me check my conditional formatting and see if it's there or not. But the easiest way I'll do it is I just select the data set and I want to see, all the cells that contain conditional formatting. Why? Because the fact that you are seeing yellow there is because there are cells that, meet the criteria that you have put there. If there are no cells that meet the criteria, nothing may be highlighted, but it doesn't mean that there isn't a conditional formatting behind. Do you understand? Okay, so let's do our Control G and do Alt S and then just say what? Conditional format. And when you do conditional format and do all in this case, okay, so you can see that even on the age, there's a conditional formatting. But in this case, no cell meets the conditional formatting, and that's why none of them is what? Highlighted. But there is a conditional formatting. And sometimes the conditional formatting may not even be to highlight it, so you don't necessarily just know by looking. You can use the go to special to figure that out. So once you select one cell, same way, Control G Alt S and say conditional format and you say same, it means it will show you all the cells that contain the same conditional formatting as the cell you selected, and you do okay. And it kind of shows you that. If you then want to change, all of them at once to something else or take out the conditional formatting, you can do that if you maybe go to conditional formatting and say what clear rows from what selected cells. Okay, so that's where this video is going to end. This was just an attempt, to maybe show you use cases, examples of, things you can do with the go to special dialog. I know there are a few things people do with the go to special dialog, but I wanted to just treat every element so that we are more, familiar with the go to special. And depending on, your scenario or your case, you might find, one of these useful. Like I said, there are a lot of other options to doing the same things you do with go to special, but depending on the case, if I want to show the cells that are dependent cells with just an arrow, then I use trace dependence. If I want to select the cells that are dependent of precedent cells, then I use my go to special. You understand? So it depends on the scenario. It's not every time I also want to use a formula to say, oh, if this is equal to this, then do this. I might just want to change cells that are different in situ. I can just use my row and column differences from go to special. So the objective of the scenario will drive the approach. But it's always good to have, a lot of tools in your bag of tricks or your toolkit bag, so to say, so that depending on the scenario, you can always address it appropriately. So this is where this video is going to end. I hope you have enjoyed these three parts video on go to special. If you have comments, recommendations or more examples on what we've treated, you can put them in the comment section. If you like this video, also please hit the like button. You can also subscribe to the channel Excel Moments. Like I'd always say, if you can think it, Excel most likely can do it. I'm out.